high school, I always knew I wanted to attend college. I've always been really independent. I've had a job since I was 16. I saved up for my own car. About a week after prom, I had a really severe stomach ache. The stomach ache was misdiagnosed 2 different times as the stomach flu by 2 different doctors. After about 8 days, I knew something was really wrong. I told my dad that he needed to take me to the hospital. Urgent care took my blood work and they told me that the infection level in my body was a 30, and in a normal person it's under 0.1. So I was immediately rushed into surgery for appendicitis. I was super close to becoming septic. They told me that if I didn't go to the hospital that night that I probably would have passed away in my sleep. About a week after surgery, I went into my post-op appointment, basically expecting them to say, "Hey, your incisions look good." But that's where they told me that unfortunately they found a tumor inside my appendix. So I was immediately referred to oncology. And in oncology, I found out that I had monoendocrine cancer. I was angry. I felt like I'd always been a pretty good person my whole life. So I kind of had that question of why me? Why do I deserve this? Why am I going through this? So they did a lot of extensive tests like bone marrow biopsies, lymph node removals, colonoscopies. I went in for a kidney biopsy. My PET scan came back and there was several areas of my body lighting up where they assumed that the cancer had spread to. So I was sent off for a lymph node removal, and my lymph node removal came back clean, which was super confusing to the doctors because they were like, "Something is obviously wrong with this girl and she's getting sicker by the day. We just don't know what's going on." I had about a year of being a medical mystery. While I was going through that, I started experiencing symptoms like hair loss, weight loss. My legs were turning blue with no explanation. Eating became the biggest struggle in my day. I was a newly college kid, so I was getting to see my friends go on spontaneous trips. I was sitting in bed watching my hair fall out every day. And then I also questioned because I was like, if God is so good and so loving, why would he let something so terrible happen to me? It made me feel like God had abandoned me. I had one of the 7 doctors say, "Hey, Ava, I think you might have an autoimmune disease. I'm gonna refer you to a rheumatologist." And I kind of shrugged my shoulders and thought, right, this is another doctor that thinks they know what's wrong with me but doesn't. They were unfortunately booked out 6 months. I was connected with the same scheduler every time I called, gave the same spiel of, "Hey, I'm Ava Johnson. Call me if there's a cancellation." And I did this every day for weeks. But there was one day that I had called her and I said, "Hey, this is Ava, if there's any cancellations." And she gave the same response of course, we'll call you back. But I stopped her and I told her that I was a 19-year-old girl and my kidneys weren't functioning. You could see my ribs, my hair was gone, my legs were turning blue, and nobody knew what was wrong with me and that this doctor was gonna be my only hope. The scheduler replied with, "Ava, I don't know you and you don't know me, but I believe God is gonna create a miracle in your life." In that moment, I probably rolled my eyes and said, "Yeah, right." And I just kind of went on with my day. I didn't really think much of what the scheduler had said. I probably thought that, in all honesty, she was full of it. I was sitting on my bathroom floor, and I remember thinking how hard eating breakfast was that day. And I remembered what the scheduler had told me about God creating a miracle in my life. I looked up, and I told God that I didn't know if he was there, and I didn't know if he cared, but I trusted him, and I really needed his help. As soon as I ended my prayer, the scheduler had called me and told me that there was a cancellation and she could get me in at 9 a.m. the next day. In that moment, it was like confirmation that God would leave the 99 to find me and he would go to any lengths to bring me restoration and healing. So when I went into that doctor appointment, they had diagnosed me with lupus after a year, nobody knowing what was wrong with me. And ever since that doctor appointment, my blood work has only improved, which is crazy because I spent a year of it getting worse and worse and worse and worse. But after I said that prayer that I had trusted him, I have gotten nothing but better. My hair has grown back. I've gained back all the weight that I had lost. My legs don't turn blue unexplainably. So overall, I'm healthy, I'm cancer-free. I got a message from my rheumatologist about 2 months ago that the lupus activity in my body is almost non-existent. There was a night at Young Adults where I don't even remember exactly what they talked about, but it was just super heavy, and they were like, "What's your next step?" And they talked about the connection card, and I just remember thinking, like, I want to get baptized. That was something that had really never crossed my mind until that night, and I thought, I'm gonna put an X on this card and wait till somebody, calls me. And after service, I went up to Caleb, I said, "Hey, I put an X on the card to get baptized," and he kind of hugged me and told me he was proud of me, and I knew it was the right decision. Trusting God definitely didn't come overnight. It was a process that took a while. Going from being so angry at God to loving God was definitely a journey. It wasn't quick. It's just crazy how God can take your whole life and do a 180 the moment you put it in his hands. And that's kind of what happened for me. So I spent so much time thinking about how I lost everything: my weight, my hair, my ability to eat, get out of bed, go to school. But I would go through it all again if that meant I got to experience the faithfulness of God.
Oh, powerful. Ava's here at our Springfield campus, and she's serving today. And to be able to just see her story, one, that's really cool that she would be vulnerable enough to share her story with us. And why we share that is as we celebrate water baptisms next week, which I like Easter. I'm a pastor. I like this. We should keep doing that, right? But Easter is great. Water baptisms are probably my favorite services because they represent so many stories just like Ava's, who whether they found God in a really good time or they found God in a really tough time, there came a moment where they said, I want his story to be my story. And we're going to do that next week. At all of our campuses, we're celebrating that. Maybe baptism's for you. How would you know it's for you? Baptism doesn't make you a follower of Jesus. It just makes you wet. But what it does is it shows you, it shows those around you, it's a decision I've already made. And if you've decided to follow Jesus and you've not yet gone public in your faith, you deciding to go get baptized, I think this could be your next step. You can mark that on the card. We have that. If you're joining us online, we have a link there. We will prioritize this week just following up with you and getting it ready, getting the service ready for you next week. So I think it'd be a great weekend to come and check out too as we celebrate those stories. And that's really the whole point of Easter. Easter's about God showing up when we're confused, when we're discouraged, when we're distracted, and he shows up no matter what. So, well, I'm glad you're here. Happy Easter. Turn to someone near you and say, Happy Easter. Say, don't touch me, okay? Hey, glad you're here. This weekend, right now, we have 4 different campuses who are meeting. We welcome you to each of our campuses and joining online. Throughout the weekend, we've had 16 different gatherings between our 4 campuses, and this is our last one, but I'm going to preach it like it's our first one, right? Because I love what this day represents. Easter is about a God who sends his son, fully God, fully human, lives a perfect life and dies, but doesn't stay dead. He rises from the dead. Now, I hate to ruin that for you if you're still on season 5 of The Chosen, but that's how it ends. It's how it ends, right? He rose again. And because 2,000 years ago, someone refused to stay in that grave, and we celebrate Easter. I'm reminded of a story of a family. They wanted to go to Israel on a Holy Land tour. And I've done 3 of these Holy Land tours, big fan of them. So this guy wanted his whole family to come, and his wife wanted his mother-in-law to come. And so, you know, happy wife, happy life. You're like, okay, mother-in-law can come with us. So they go on this Holy Land tour. While they're there in Israel, the mother-in-law gets sick, quickly sick, and she passes there in Israel. And so they're trying to figure out what to do. They meet with a funeral director. And so they're sitting there with a funeral director, and the funeral director says, well, we have a couple options. First option is we can prepare your mother-in-law, and we could ship her body to America on a plane, and it'll be $8,000, but we can take care of that for you. But the second option, we can do a service right here in Israel for only $250. We'll have a beautiful service. What's best for your family? So they talked about it, and the guy comes back to the funeral director and says, well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to have you go ahead and fly her body to America. The funeral director says, are you sure about that, sir? I mean, that's $8,000. We could really have a lovely service if you just trust us here in Israel. And he got a little nervous, and he reaches across the desk and grabs the funeral director by the collar and pulls him close and says, listen, 2,000 years ago, there was a guy that was buried in Israel, and on the 3rd day, he got out of the grave, and I am not going to take that chance with my mother-in-law. Ship her to America. If you're sitting by your mother-in-law, hug her, hug her, hug her. For me, I love mother-in-laws. But happy Easter, and that is actually what we're celebrating, is that a guy did not stay in the grave. Now, here's what I wrote in my outline. In the North Point Mo app, if you're trying to gauge when to put your shoes back on and we're about ready to be done, I wrote it down this way at the very top, that my response to his story has a lot to do with my role in the story. And when it comes to Easter, that's certainly true. My response to the story, Easter story, your story, any story, my response has a lot to do with my role in the story. For example, you want to share with me your exciting spring break trip. Cool, I'm interested. It's not going to impact my life. Now, if you invited me on your spring break trip, that'll impact my life. My role in the story impacts my response to the story. And that's true with Easter. Some of you are like, man, I came to celebrate Easter. And some of you are like, man, I love Easter. Easter's all of it. Well, let me give you the Easter story in a nutshell, or should we say eggshell, or whatever it would work. Okay, so here's Easter. The story of Easter is about God who created us for relationship, because it goes back to the very beginning. God created us for relationship. He says it's good. He desires a relationship with us. And then the story, the Bible's a big book, not because it's thick with a bunch of rules, but because there's so many stories of how much God loves you and how much he loves me and humanity. And so there's all these stories that show us this pursuit that God has for us. And so God wants relationship, and it says that humanity sinned. And sin, just to be super clear, is anytime we go against God's best. And we've all done it, and quite frankly, we're all pretty decent at it, okay? We're pretty good at that. And what happens, the very first sin, it breaks relationship, because that's what sin does. Sin leads to death. Death in opportunities, death in trust, death in relationship, both with those around us and with God within us. And so what happens is kicks off this big pursuit of God to restore relationship with mankind. And so there's this system, it's called the sacrificial system. It takes up a lot of the Old Testament, how men would try and sacrifice something to be able to restore relationship. There were prophecies that one day this system will be done and that God will send his son. Well, 2,000 years ago, God sent his son, Jesus, fully God, fully man, God in the bod. And he was born as a baby, which most of us are, right? But he was born as a baby, very vulnerable. God sends his son in this vulnerable skin, and he grows up, not being accused of being God's son. No one was seeing superpowers fly off his fingers or anything like that. But then when he's about 30, he begins to walk around and teach in such a way his teaching would mesmerize audiences. He's talking about the kingdom of heaven, and he's showing how it's countercultural to the empire of Rome. And people are loving his words. He's describing God in a way they had never grasped. And he reveals that he is God. He says, if you know me, you know the Father, because I and the Father are one. And people are loving it, and their crowds are coming. And he's bending supernatural laws. Like, he's healing people. He's got an authority on his words. This is changing everything in this dusty Galilean province, until there's a couple groups of people who get upset. The first is a group of religious people. They're the religious powers that day, because they had a monopoly on access with God. They had figured out the system. If you need God to forgive you or connect with you, you come to us. We sell you a lamb at a price that we dictate, and then we will allow you to have access with God. And when Jesus is saying everyone can have access with God, it messed up their system. So they didn't want Jesus walking around. They wanted to snuff him out. And then there's another group of people. It's the political power of the Roman Empire. Now, they didn't care that God said he was God. They didn't care about that. They just wanted to keep the peace. And when there was tension with the Jewish people and Jesus and the followers of Jesus, they thought, oh no, there's going to be a riot. Now we're going to lose our jobs. And so on a dark Friday night 2,000 years ago, the Jewish leaders and the political leaders got together. They arrested Jesus. They whipped him, stripped him, tortured him, nailed him to a tree, and buried him in a grave. And they guarded that grave with a big old sealed boulder, and they put Roman soldiers in front of the tomb. And as long as that rogue rabbi would stay dead, they'd been done with it. But on the third day, Jesus got out of that grave. We call that resurrection. And because he didn't stay dead, there's life that now leaks to all of us. He was the one perfect, sinless sacrifice to fulfill the sacrifice. So you and I don't need to buy a lamb and conjure up God's presence. We just personalize it. That's Easter. But Easter is just a celebration that doesn't have a big impact until it becomes personal. And when it becomes personal, it becomes powerful. So what happens is in these days, Jesus shows up and he begins to appear. When he came out of the grave, it's not like there was a crowd of people with a big fireworks and a countdown, 3, 2, 1, he's risen. Yeah, it wasn't like that. Even though Jesus had dropped some hints that it would happen, like, I'm gonna die, and then other hints like, I'll rise on the third day, people didn't get it, right? They didn't get it. And so on the third day, they were just like, man, he's dead. His disciples, the ones who followed him the most, they were so heartbroken and disillusioned because life didn't look like they thought it would. They thought they'd be like ushered into this new political power and they would have authority, and none of that happened the way they thought it would. And so they were so discouraged, distracted, depressed. And then when Jesus showed up and he appeared to them, they thought it was more logical that he was a ghost or a gardener than he was God, even though he had said he was going to do that. They had no place in their mind for someone, because they've done the math. Historically speaking, nearly 100% of people who die stay that way. And then Jesus got up out of the grave. Well, then it says he appears to his disciples. Now, but one of them was out. I don't know where he was. His name was Thomas. And I want to tell Thomas's story today because I want to talk about your story and my story. Thomas wasn't there. We don't know where he was. The Bible doesn't say. Maybe he was at Walmart getting milk. We don't know. Thomas was gone. Jesus shows up, and everyone's like, what? Like, they're like, Jesus is here. When Thomas gets home that day, can you imagine how awkward that conversation is? Thomas is like, hey guys, how was your day? They're like, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. But it was a rerun on Wheel of Fortune today. That was kind of disappointing. Oh, and we saw Jesus. Thomas is like, what? Oh, yeah, Jesus showed up. The one from the grave, the one from the grave came and visited us. We saw Jesus. And Thomas is like, cool story, bro. Like for real? And they're like, well, I had to be there. And it says for a week, Thomas has to rely on someone else's story. And so the disciples, it's crazy. Some of them, Easter's resurrection meant Jesus is alive. And for Thomas, because his role in the story was different, the power of the story was pretty weak. And he was filled with doubts. We call him Doubting Thomas throughout history. And I don't know about you. I don't know which disciple you resonate with the most. Maybe the disciples who saw the risen Jesus and you're like, this has marked my life. Some of you are followers of Jesus and you circle the date of Easter as soon as you study your lunar calendar and figure out when it's going to be, right? Some of you, this day represents the explosion of your faith. You love it. You celebrate Easter. You absolutely love it. And I'm with you. But some of you resonate with Thomas. You're someone who's like, yeah, I've heard about it. Cool story, bro. I had to be there. It's just not my story. And I'm here to celebrate, but I'm not here to experience it. And for you, maybe you're here and you're just being polite, right? Someone invited you here and that's what you do before you have ham. And you're like, okay. Maybe you were dragged here. Is that grammatically correct? Or you were drugged here, which you were drugged and then dragged here. Whatever it is, okay? It's maybe for some of you, this was not your hope. But it's someone else's story. Here's what I want to do today. I want to talk about how Easter can become powerful once it becomes personal. Now, the disciples were filled with fear. It says they were locked in a room. They locked themselves in a room because of fear. And so I want to help me preach, I need my friend Preston to come on out. And so Preston, would you give Preston a hand? Preston, this is the sixth service and you're still here. I cannot do this without you. So Preston, if you would, we got a prop that we need. And Preston, you could go ahead and set up the prop. And then you can stand right next to it there. Now, here's the deal. Preston, he's not a scary man. Now, I'm not picking a fight because I think you'd win. I have the build of a victim. I get that. But you're one of the nicer people I know. Like, he's not scary. So I need you to help me preach this message. But when I say you, I mean that you, not you. Okay, so give Preston a hand. Thank you very much. Okay, so Preston, he's not scary. He's super nice. And this life-size cardboard cutout of Preston is also not scary. Like, I'm in Springfield, I don't see anyone grabbing their purse and being like, I don't trust it, okay? Like, it's not scary. Like, when I see this, I'm like, hey, that looks like Preston. That's awesome. But it is scary, depends on where you see it. Recently, I got to the church offices, and I was the first one there. It was a dark and stormy night. I unlocked the offices, boop, 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 hit my code, which I probably should not do that in front of everybody because some of you just analyze that. Okay, hit my code. And then the light switch is not by the alarm. So even though I turned off the alarm, I've got to walk across the offices to get to the light switch. I'm walking in the dark alone in a building to get to the light switch, and there, cardboard cutout Preston is staring at me right by the light switch. And it scared me. Not scared me because that's scary, it scared me because that was there. I had to go home and change my pants that day because that was there. When I don't expect to see that there, it's scary. It's scary. And why did the disciples, why were they afraid when they saw Jesus? Not because Jesus was scary, because that was there and they didn't expect it. So today I want to talk about fear. As I talk about fear, I know that's creepy if we hold it up there, so let's be done with that. Fear comes from this word, phobos, right? Phobos. And we get this word phobia. Anybody have a phobia? A bunch of brave people, aren't you? Okay. We'll just release a bunch of snakes in the auditorium and see if that's true, right? Okay. Okay, so how many of you know what your phobia is? How many of you, your phobia is raising your hand in a crowded room? Anybody? Thanks for working on that. I appreciate that. That's cool. Okay. So phobia, we get that from a Greek word phobos. There's actually a Greek god. When you study the Greek gods, the Greek god of fear is Phobos, the Greek god of fear. Now, he's not a famous god. Marvel hasn't put him in a movie yet. But in the Greek legends, Phobos is the son of the god of war. And the god of fear, he will go take a chariot and drive ahead of the god of war, his dad, and he would go into the land that his dad's going to attack, and it'd make everyone freaked out. And then it's easier for his dad to come along and win the war. And what we see in history is Alexander the Great, before war, he would sacrifice to the Greek god Phobos. And he would sacrifice and say, Greek god of Phobos, give us courage and give our enemies fear. And I don't think he's the last one in human history to sacrifice something to fear. Because a lot of us do that. Fear isn't free. Fear costs us something. And the first Easter, the disciples were so afraid they locked the door. And then let's read in John chapter 20. It says this. It says, now Thomas, also known as Didymus. Everyone say Didymus. Sounds like a bad rapper name, okay? But anyways, he was one of the 12. He was not with the disciples when Jesus came, so the other disciples told Thomas, we've seen the Lord. Had to be there. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. That's a pretty bold statement. Like, he's a guy who followed Jesus. And he's like, I don't believe it. All of Christian history has called him Doubting Thomas. He's the Eeyore of the disciples. Womp, womp. They're like, he's alive. And he's like, doubt it. Unless I touch his wounds. A week later. It's a long time to be disappointed. The disciples were in the house again and Thomas was with them. You bet your bippy he's with them. You think for a second he's going to run an errand again? He's like, no way. Last time I ran an errand, Jesus showed up. I'm staying put. And it says, though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them, which I know this isn't a science book, but I kind of wish it were because I'd love to know the science behind this. How did Jesus walk through a locked door? He's God. So, did he arrange the molecular structure of his body and whoop, whoop? I don't know. I wish I knew. I just know that he did it. He walks through this locked door. Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. The first word that Jesus says to the disciples who are scared is peace. The word that he would have used is called shalom, shalom. Peace, wholeness, confidence. In order to defeat Phobos, here's some shalom. He says, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe. Now, as a pastor for a long time, I've done a lot of hospital visitations. And I've seen some nasty stuff in the hospital. And I've never had one person say, you want to touch it? And if they did, I'd be like, I'm good, thanks, right? So I think it's kind of odd. But Jesus is like, go ahead. Why? Jesus knew what Thomas had said a week earlier. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. I hate to go all English on you on a Sunday, but that's personal pronouns right there. My. Easter became personal and powerful because he had an experience. Then Jesus says, believe, because you've seen me, you believe. Blessed are those who haven't seen, yet they still believe. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples. They're not even recorded in this book, which time out. Come on, write a longer book. I'd love to read them, but anyway. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Okay, here's what I want to do, okay? I know that the ham is on time baked, so let's get going, okay? So what we have in this original Easter story, we have some observations that we can turn into principles. And if we apply these principles, they can transform our life. The first one I wrote down is this, that Jesus has the ability to enter doors that I've locked. Isn't that so much like Jesus? That you might say, I've locked Jesus out. And it doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you're afraid, or you're hurt, or you're jaded. People have done you dirty. And you're like, we're good. Easter's not for me. Jesus isn't for me. Maybe it's your baggage, maybe it's your background, maybe it's your hurt, your hang-ups. But a lot of us, what we do is we say, Jesus, nope, I'm done with that. And here's what's so annoying and cool about Jesus. He does a whoop, whoop, and all of a sudden he shows up inside the doors that we thought we locked him out of. And maybe you're here today and you thought there's no way that Easter could be personal for you. You're just being polite. And my prayer has been that Jesus would whoop, whoop right into your heart today. Second thing that I see in this story is that he didn't die in spite of me. He died in pursuit of me. Jesus didn't die because I'm an ingrate and he's like, look what you made me do. He died because he loves me. He wasn't a victim. He surrendered to the cross. If I were Jesus, I know I'm not, but if I were, it would have looked different in the story. If I rose from the dead and I showed up there, I wouldn't have been like, shalom, shalom. I'd have been like, oh, nice one, guys. You thought locking the door would keep me out? Ooh, ha, 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 ha. No. Because I've got a little bone to pick with you. I would have sat them all down and, shall we say, have a come to Jesus meeting. Okay, I'd have been like, listen, when I needed you the most, where were you? You guys split. You guys skedaddled. You guys denied me. You betrayed me. You cussed out a little girl. Come on, she's in a counselor's office because you were afraid to. What are you guys doing? I needed you the most. From this point on, we need to define what friendship is. We're going to set some boundaries, and I expect us all to live by these boundaries. That's what I would have said if I were Jesus, and if they agreed, then I would have said, shalom. But Jesus comes to the people who just betrayed him, says, I know you're afraid, peace. I know it was confusing, peace. Because doubt to Jesus didn't seem like an irritation, it felt more like an invitation. Jesus says, Thomas, I came to see you and you weren't there, so I came back. Because I died in pursuit of you, and I don't know if you feel like you're God's burden, but you're not his burden. You're his beloved. He loves you. So today, be reminded, he died in pursuit of you. I think there's an interesting word in there. The word believe is in there a lot. I think that we need to understand that Jesus didn't issue us a call to behave, but a call to believe. He didn't say, I've showed up so that you can behave in my name. Believe. There's a difference between feeling like I've got to act a certain way, clean up a certain way in order to be in, and just personalizing the gift of Easter. And not that we want to live a sloppy life. We could be like, woo, look at me live like hell and still make it to heaven, right? Because that kind of blurs your ability to impact other people, sending some mixed messages. But it's your behavior and your performance is not about your salvation. Your salvation is just internalizing and personalizing the resurrection power of Jesus, the sacrifice he made and the resurrection power. And when you do that now, I want to let that foundation be the filter upon which I live all my life. I want my relationships to be filtered through the message of Jesus. I want the way I work to be filtered through the message of Jesus. So it's this call to believe in him. It's personal. And I wrote down this, that the Easter story is how Jesus' story impacts my story. The Easter story is, what have I personally done with Jesus' story? Thomas had a moment where Easter was about his friends' belief till it became his personal foundation. Have you had that moment? Have you personalized Jesus? What does that look like? This is my favorite part of my job, is to tell you this. What does it mean to follow Jesus? As clear as I can, is to invite him in. Say, Jesus, forgive me. Scripture calls it sin. Everything that I do or undo that goes against your mission, from this day forward, I want to be aligned with you. And when you personalize that, that's it. That's it. Some of you are like, no, that doesn't sound like bad news. Because it's not. It's good. It's good news. Like, it's good news. It's scandalous. It's the kind of news that you're like, so you're saying, if I personalize this, then he has a relationship with me? And what else? Nothing. Doesn't that make you want to go and tell someone else? And Jesus met Thomas where he was. He says, Thomas, let my scars tell my story. That's what I did for you. And Jesus invited Thomas to touch his wounds because Jesus invites us to let him touch our wounds. Where have you been hurt? Where have you been hindered? Invite him in. Well, I'm going to invite the worship teams to come on up at each of our campuses. And as they do that, let me tell you how important this resurrection is. Paul writes about it a couple decades later. There's a couple of theories that started developing in the first couple of decades that maybe Jesus didn't really rise from the dead. Because if he did, then that means he's God. So a lot of people were like, we'll give you that he's a good teacher, but not God. So he did all those things, but the reports of his life are greatly exaggerated. And there's one theory that still is today considered a theory. It's called the swoon theory, that Jesus didn't resurrect from the dead. The swoon theory is that Jesus was arrested, whipped, stripped, beaten to a pulp, nailed to a tree, ripped off the tree, wrapped up, and thrown in a sealed tomb. But they forgot to check his pulse. And he didn't die, he just fainted. And then somehow in the grave, he wakes up, he's like, whoa, it's cold and damp in here. I must get out of here. Sips some OJ, and then like rolls around the rock, and then overpowers the Romans. I think the swoon theory demands more faith in the fact that God resurrected. Another theory is that the fierce followers theory, that his followers, they robbed the body just so it makes it look like he was God, that he rose from the dead. And I'm like, have you all read the book? Like, it has nothing to do with his followers. His followers were weak sauce. His followers ran. His followers were afraid. They didn't go to some corporate retreat in 24 hours, drink enough liquid courage, take kung fu lessons, and come back and kick tail over the Romans. That's not what happened. They were afraid. But on that third day, If that obscure carpenter, that rogue rabbi could just stay dead, this all would snuff out. But Jesus refused to stay dead, and he rose from the dead, and that is the foundation of faith. And Paul, writing about it 20 years later, there were these rumors that, he's a good teacher. And so here's what Paul says about resurrection. He says, and why do you think that I keep risking my neck in this dangerous work? I look death in the face practically every day that I live. Do you think I'd do this if I wasn't convinced of your resurrection and mine as guaranteed by the resurrected Messiah, Jesus? Do you think I was just trying to act heroic when I fought the wild beasts at Ephesus, hoping it wouldn't be the end of me? Not on your life. It's resurrection, always been resurrection that undergirds what I do and say and the way that I live. If there's no resurrection, then when we eat, we drink, and the next day we die, and that's all there is to it. But don't fool yourselves and don't let yourselves be poisoned by this anti-resurrection talk. I'm like, Paul. He said the power of Easter cannot be dismissed. It's the foundation. My life might not turn out happy clappy. I might not always get a good report. I might have people who don't agree with me, don't get along with me. Storms may come, wind may blow. My faith is built on a different foundation though. That Jesus Christ has given me hope no matter what I face. So here's what I like to do. I'm going to invite the ushers to go ahead and come forward too. As ushers come forward at each of our campuses, I want us to look at these cards. And we've talked about these cards. So let me just take a couple moments and address these cards. If you're here today and you need to make Easter personal right now, would you just invite Jesus into your heart? Through your closed areas, say, God, speak to me. Forgive me of sin. You don't need to come to the front. We don't need to whisk you into another room. You can just do it right now. If you're here today and you want Easter to be personal, let me pray with you. Father, today, across our campuses, those joining online, I pray this good news that is so scandalous would become personal and powerful. For those who need forgiveness of sin right now, let today be the day you walk through those doors. Today, forgive of sin, and today, give a foundation of hope. I pray that they will always be able to look back on this moment right now, that this is the time they surrendered to you. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Listen, if you made that prayer personal, you might not feel any different tomorrow. Doesn't matter what you feel like. You might not face anything different tomorrow. It doesn't matter what you're facing. It's a foundation thing. We would love it if you marked out on your card, I'm making a new decision to follow Jesus, because we want to send some resources we think will be helpful to you. That'd be awesome. In just a second, you drop it in the bucket. If you're saying, hey, I want to go public with this faith now, with water baptism, or maybe you've already made a decision to follow Jesus but haven't gone public, go ahead and mark that card. In just a second, it's also our time to give back financially. Now, this is for those who are on the mission to North Point already. If you're a guest with us, we really don't expect anything of you. We want to do something for you. So if you mark the first-time guest box, we're going to make a donation in your honor to a local charity. We'll send you a couple options. You can tell us which one you'd like us to make the donation to. Also, we have our team has put together some resources that I think are awesome. They talk about, how do I talk with God about some of my doubts, some of my fears, some of my hangups? I think it's a great resource for you to wrestle with some scripture. If you would like that, just mark first-time guest, or if you're not a first-time guest but you want that because you're kind of a skeptic at heart, write the word resource. We'll do our best to follow up this week with you. In just a second, you can drop that in the bucket. So ushers, you can usher away at all of our campuses. We can drop our cards and our giving in the bucket. As they do that, let me just wrap up with this last thought about Thomas. Thomas, his story in the Bible doesn't have a lot more to say. But what we see in other historical writings, there's several historical writings that talk about Thomas. And here's what they say happened to Thomas after that Easter. It became personal, and the message of Jesus became his foundation. He left Israel, and he traveled around the known world to tell people about Jesus. He went to southern India. And he spent about 20 years in southern India talking to anybody who would listen about our resurrected God named Jesus Christ who loved them. And he started the Church of India. Today in India, they have monuments and cathedrals dedicated to the legacy of Thomas, who was known as the one who brought Jesus' message to India. And his life wasn't super easy. As a matter of fact, he died as a shish kebab. He got speared by an angry king because he wouldn't stop telling people about Jesus. But whether his weather in life was good, his circumstances were bad, he let Christ be the foundation that impacted a legacy. His story was impacted by the Easter story. Now I'm going to invite you to stand up with me at all of our campuses as we sing one last song together. It's a mantra that doesn't matter if the storms of life come down, the wind blows around us, that our foundation is sure as the resurrection of Jesus.